Welcome to another episode of Unvarnished. I am Chris Hyde, and today we welcome in Lou Raiola from the Vomela Companies. Hey, Lou, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Chris. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to our discussion.
Same here. So, Lou, we met at one of the D-Scoop events last year. It was the Eco Summit, and I loved some of the things that you had to talk about. It opened a lot of people's eyes that were in the audience. It was really an eye-opener for them. And it was a little daunting, to be quite honest. I mean, it was a lot to listen to and a lot to digest. But I wanted to kind of revisit that, see what's happened since then, and kind of get your updates on where things are at in sustainability when it comes to the print industry and marketing in general. So I know that's a huge, that's a pretty wide gamut. But I guess I just wanted to pick up where we left off. But first, a little bit of background. I just wanted to have the audience know your history and how you got to where you're at right now.
Well, again, thank you, and it was great to be with the group in Orlando where we first met. And yes, it was daunting, and what you'll hear today is it's continues to be very complex and ever changing. But maybe to give a little context, so I've been at this quite a while. This is my 39th year. I'll be wrapping up in the sustainability movement, and with the last 5 years, really grateful to be working with the team at the Vomela Companies. We're a group that's headquartered in St. Paul, Minnesota, a visual communications company of varying capabilities with over 20 different locations around the country, and mainly working with Fortune 500 brands, and that's good context for what we'll talk about because it's a big part of our journey. I lead our sustainability efforts and our ESG efforts across Vomela, but have a great team of great individuals that I work with to advance this. So we're excited about our role in this space. We got a lot to learn, but welcome the opportunity to share this with your audience.
Excellent. And what again is your title? Because it's a mouthful.
So I'm keeping it short. I'm the director of ESG and corporate social responsibility.
All right. And when you came on board with Vomela, is that a totally new role?
It is. Vomela is celebrated it's now past 75 years as an organization, family-run business, privately held, like I said, in St. Paul, Minnesota, and always innovative, always doing amazing, great work. A lot of growth came through acquisition. But I think, as your D-Scoop community learned, we're big into innovation. The company has been over years, a lot of digital presses and our friends at HP and such. But always somewhat early adopters. And so I would say 4.5, 5 years ago to come on board as a entirely focused on sustainability and ESG, it was quite, I would say a leap, but a forward thinking decision by leadership and a very strategic move to align with clients. So it's a dedicated position and a new position.
And 5 years ago, how many people knew what ESG was?
Probably very few in our industry. And but the key criteria here is that as I'm sure many of the audience that's going to be tuning in here has learned, is that at least at the public reporting level, there's a lot of questions being asked of vendors, supply chain, otherwise known as Scope 3, in their world. So as ESG has moved over the last several years from kind of the C-suite of our clients down into their procurement side, I'm sure other firms, not just printers or visual communications companies, but those in our kind of total space, have fielded over the years questions and probably are seeing an intensification of questions coming from the clients.
So what is your day-to-day look like? What are you tasked with?
Well, it's evolved since we were last together. We've added an ESG associate to work on internal efforts within the operational side of it. So I'll give you kind of maybe a snapshot of what it evolved, where it's evolved, and kind of where it is today. But as I mentioned, we've been at this for a number of years, and to the total credit of the leadership. They agreed at the outset to make this a strategy, for the organization. And by making it a strategy, it became a dual approach, which was and is that we need to look at this internally, like how do we organizationally transform our operations? So what is our carbon footprint? What are we doing internally around air quality and policy, et cetera, et cetera? And I can touch on more of that as we go through. But also then in the alignment with the clients, really looking at it around, I'll call it solutions, and creating opportunities to be that kind of shared values partner to our clients who are looking at alternative substrates, end of use of signage, things along those lines. So I see that more as kind of the external. So we took a dual approach of internal and external. And during the first several years, my responsibilities were to lead us in both of those areas. But early on, we formed a cross-functional committee inside of Vomela, and then I would call it kind of across the enterprise, looking at our various different locations. And again, we've grown through acquisition. And so that ingestion of new entities coming on board means new information, new systems, new approaches to try and integrate into this. And so it was a large undertaking, quite frankly, Chris. And so, but the importance of the cross-functional committee over the years, and I can lead it into today, is that we've involved procurement on our side internally. We've involved innovation. We have a dedicated innovation team inside the walls, sales, marketing. And so when you start to have representation from the various different cross-functional teams, you're getting a lot of collaboration, around both internal, but also that external side of how to advance things. So what's emerged over the years is we went through sustainable green print certification. We went through a move, during the early stages of the process, which it resulted in the largest single rooftop solar array in the city of St. Paul. A lot of things were being done across leadership and across this cross-functional team. But as we've now transformed over these years, there was a real commitment to dive deeper. And what I mean by that is we now have gone out and done a greenhouse gas emissions scope 1, scope 2 analysis of every one of our facilities. So what was maybe started at our headquarters in St. Paul has now transformed and evolved to bringing in all of our production facilities, all of our manufacturing facilities. So with that, we've added a teammate that is managing that internal kind of operational journey. And my work today has been focused on really supporting sales enablement with our key clients and prospects to help us advance their missions as their supplier, and then also to work on our brand and how we're positioned, as this is a value proposition for us. We believe it's a key differentiator for us. So sorry for the long-winded answer, but that's a bit of the history and a bit about where I am today.
Now, again, we'll back up a tiny bit here. You started to talk about scopes. Maybe our entire, just to be clear, can you give a breakdown of scope 1, 2, and 3? Because you'll probably do a much more eloquent job for the audience than I.
Yeah. So let's start with maybe our clients on the public reporting side. So this will bring in kind of scopes 1, 2, and 3. So you'll hear a lot around what's your carbon footprint. Maybe it will be the terminology that's used, or what are your emissions? And I happen to look at things like not only our emissions, but our water and our waste, impact as well. But for this brief discussion and keeping it simple, you think about direct and indirect emissions of an organization. So think of the buildings, the facilities. So our clients are looking at their stores, their distribution centers, their offices. And so they've got a pretty good handle on baselining what scope one and scope two are. So think of it as their utilities, like their consumption of gasoline or fuels for their company owned vehicles. Um, the overall, if they've got food service, so their chillers and all the different things. So it's really what is that greenhouse gas emissions from, let's call it, energy sources for their facilities are covered in that scope one and scope two. Scope three for a public reporting entity is their largest component of scope three is their suppliers. Now you're looking at let's call it a Fortune 500 company who has operational control of scope one and two, right? They own the facilities or they lease or they've got a handle on what those are and they can drive change. But when the majority of your carbon footprint sits in your supply chain or scope three, and there's widely reported across many industries that more than 90% of a public reporting entity's greenhouse gas emissions, over 90% sits in scope three. So when you see a public company making a declaration that they're going to be net zero by year XX, and they are including scope three in their boundary, that means that they need to drive change where they don't have operational control across all those suppliers. And then think of it as like direct and indirect suppliers. And then I'll stop there, Chris, because it'll get it'll get more complex. But for us, the way we look at it as Vomela is that we're an indirect, meaning that if it's a grocery store chain, the food that they're selling would be the direct vendors, let's say, but the signage and all the communications and everything that we're involved in would be that indirect. Well, companies need to, they need to look at both their direct and their indirect suppliers because that 90% is a big number when you start to break it out. So what does that mean for anyone that's in this conversation around the print industry? What that means is we all need to be doing our own scope one and two. What is our carbon footprint of our operations, of our manufacturing facilities, and be able to report that because that's part of the scope three of our upline customers. I hope that helps. I hope it's not too complex, but it's really getting that first level handle on our operating emissions.
So in your early stages and all the things you've done for that first 5 years on the internal side has now kind of prepared you for the reporting that your Fortune 500 companies are now, I'm assuming, asking you for.
Yeah, we've been for years, actually several years, been asked either through questionnaires or through requests for proposals, have been fielding our sales organ. That's why it's important to have our sales leadership involved in this because they may be that first tipping point, right? Or that first entry point of hearing from the client. Or it could be a business review that, hey, we're company X. We've made public declarations that our goals are to be net zero by 2040. We need to engage our supply chain to be part of this. And so we need to understand what you, Vomela, are doing. And the good news is we've been doing and the work. So we're able to supply them with that information. And in fact, in some areas, go beyond what they're asking for. And again, with our goal being that, again, from leadership on down, is that we view our role very importantly as part of that value chain. And so we need to be that. Our approach is what we chant around the walls is, shared values. We need to have the shared values with our clients to be able to help them meet their goals. That's our mission. And so yes, we've been seeing more of that. And fortunately, the work we've invested in over the years is put us in a good position to be able to respond today to those multiplying number of requests.
Right. Now, you mentioned at the very onset, jokingly, this is sort of always evolving and always moving. what is your day like as far as how much research are you doing to keep on top of all the regulations? Because especially for you, having so many locations, I'm assuming, and delivering into so many locations, you have to, it's not like you're working in one state and you're dealing with one set of regulations. You're working across a wide region, a wide geographical footprint, and have to be on top of all of these regulations. And so, how do you do that?
Well, great. It's a great question, Chris, and it gets more complex every day because of, I think, the adoption that's happening at the client level um, has multiplied the need for that. The other piece to add to your kind of summary of the context is not just where we're located, but probably more importantly, where our clients are located. Because again, we're part of their supply chain. And where that comes into play is from a regulatory perspective. So I'm watching a lot of the regulatory activities. And from that perspective, you have federal level activities that are happening that you need to monitor. So this could be the SEC, for example, in terms of what they're looking at in terms of proposed rules or laws and things that come into play there. But then you also have at the state level and at the municipality level, various different requirements. So let's talk about the state level, for example. So a lot of discussion in the space of overall sustainability is, oh, what was the SEC going to do? Well, in fact, maybe one of the most dramatic impacts has been what the state of California has done. The state of California has enacted two laws around climate disclosures, and those include suppliers. So, on first glance, you would look at this and say, so for example, Vomela wouldn't fall into the first classification of doing $1 billion in revenue in California, let's say, as one of the criteria. But we are a supplier to companies that do vast amounts of business in California, and thus we are brought into the California law on that disclosure. So I can't express enough to the audience that it's not as much where you're located. At least from our lens, it's about where our clients are located and conducting business. Um, and many of our clients are also multinationals, which means that they have different reporting in different countries in Europe. So there's a lot that happens there. So what that means, to answer your question around my day to day, I spend every morning starting with my coffee and just getting caught up on overnight news related to regulatory, some innovation. I've got kind of a pipeline of various different newsletters, webinars, just source material, right? Content that I digest and absorb. And then on my weekends, I usually I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, so the work week is usually 7, and I love it. I'm passionate about it, so I find great satisfaction in on the weekends listening into various podcasts and webinars with experts. And what I would say, Chris, is not really experts from our industry, from the print industry. I'm looking at from the lens of the clients and the business sectors that they're in, so that my work back to the Vomela team is really from the lens more from the client side than it is from, let's say, the print side. Um, so I enjoy the research, but I'm reading reports. I'm looking at regulatory. I'm looking at innovation. That's all part of my day to day of really trying to stay abreast on things.
From clients and their directives and their requirements, what are the biggest challenges that they're not foist that they're passing down to you right now? Like, what are their priorities? What are that are putting big pressure on you guys?
I would say the regulatory on them has intensified the work. This is my own personal opinion. I won't speak on behalf of Vomela right now, but this is what I would say has changed from when we were last together. The the amount of public commitments and disclosures around declarations that companies were making around net zero and zero waste and all these other, all these related type of declarations. In the last 6 months, it's happened longer, but over the last 6 months, there's been an intensifying pressure around data quality, data verification, and I would say it's as a result that there's a lot of regulatory forces calling time out on all of these declarations and saying, prove it, right? Like there's been a lot of greenwashing, unfortunately. For those not familiar with greenwashing, this is basically making declarations that either intently are not going to be honored or were pipe dreams, in terms of where companies were going to get. I mean, imagine a public entity disclosing they're going to be net zero by X date, and you've got 90% of your impact sitting in your supply chain, and you don't have a supply chain management program how are you going to get there? So I think the regulatory bodies look at that and say, how are you going to get there? And so now they want validation. So the biggest shift has been to what I call attestation and assurance, which is giving rise to the accounting world, actually, which is interesting, Chris, because you and I have talked about ESG being this non-financial kind of risk and reporting, and the complexity of not having one standard like GAAP accounting, on the financial side. Well, now what's happening is I kind of look at it like you had the non-financial and the financial running in kind of two parallel paths. Well, now they're merging, right? There's a lot coming back into that CFO's office because of the need for assurance and attestation.
Wow. And how how is Vomela, or how are print organizations, how are they getting that verification? Like, what are the ways that you can do that in a way that does satisfy the requirements that are being asked?
Yeah, great question, Chris. So I would say that our journey, started at our corporate office in St. Paul, where we committed to the Sustainable Green Print certification. And as part of that, there was an audit. There's an audit that's part of that. And then they, as an organization, have a technology software partner. And so as an additional element of that, we retained the services or engaged the services of their partners. So what we were able to do is take the directive to capture the information, but we have a third party, and I think that's the key, is that we're looking at a trusted third party, independent kind of validator of our information. Our future, I anticipate that this may come from our clients, is that they may say, now we need to look to a financial, like a CPA firm, to validate and attest to that information. So I think we're still out in front of it a ways, but I could see in maybe 2025, if I were to kind of look through the lens, I think that's going to evolve to where there's going to be that formal CPA assurance, that's there. Again, it gets a little tricky because attestation is one thing, right? It's kind of like looking at how your criteria, your boundaries that you set, and you followed this. Okay, we can attest to that. But when you get into assurance and you have all these varying standards, it makes it hard for a firm to give you that assurance. So there's different degrees of what they call it. I won't get into it now, but so this is going to evolve. But I think the key is for anyone on the call is if you're not capturing this information, you're going to need to start capturing it. And very soon thereafter, you're going to need to look for that independent party to really be looking at the boundaries, that you set up, the criteria, the basis for what you're tracking, and then and make sure that it's been delivered. Hope that helps.
Oh, totally. And what items, just on the checklist of top 3, should they be capturing?
So I would say the number one universally has been their emissions. Is really going to be an important piece, and that cuts across various different industries. Because quite frankly, Chris, I think that's probably a data point that is pretty well established across business sectors. So no matter who your clients are, they're all trying to figure out, okay, what's our carbon footprint? So I would say that's number one. Then I would say, as it gets into our space specifically, waste is a big topic, right? Like the waste of not only at the production floor, of what you're printing towards and the raw material waste and such, but then big topic is, of course, end of use for our various clients. So a lot of innovation happening, a lot of trial and error. We're testing a lot of different things I can't get into right now, but we're spending a lot of time on the client side end of use. So that would be right up there, maybe 1A and 1B. And then there's a number of them that I would say would come into kind of the third category, depending on who the client is. But logistics, right? Transportation, logistics. So we're seeing more and more about, one of the strengths of our organization are these 20 plus locations spread out. Can we print in one facility that's closer to the end user that we're going to be shipping to reduce that time frame down, reduce our carbon footprint? How do we pack things? How efficient are we in terms of the trucks are going on or the delivery mechanisms? The construct. This is where our innovation team gets involved. How can we innovate new ways to create that same produced output, but maybe it's not as heavy. It maybe is something that can be folded and kind of move up, but when it's packed, it's in a smaller footprint. So those all I would put under kind of logistics and transportation. Those are all elements that start back in the design phase. So those would be three that kind of come top of mind.
Excellent. Thank you. Where do you see the biggest opportunity, I guess, to take advantage of it? Is it at the local level? Is there any kind of incentives at the local level, at the state level, for getting to certain waste levels or anything like that? Is there anything out there?
Well, waste is complex, right? Because as you think about the great majority of firms are dealing with some large haulers, right? And states and municipalities, unfortunately, have different different approaches, different oversight, different taxes. So it's very hard to standardize and say we're going to work with WM or Republic or whomever and just standardize this across the areas. It really gets down to the actual geographic zip code of where you're located with your facilities, and you may have 8 different haulers that are involved in that. I mean, in terms of trying to get the most efficient way, and then tap into those local incentives. So there are incentives, but they're not universal, right? Is what we've experienced with it. So that's from the waste and kind of the hauler perspective. From facilities, and again, not to go too deep, but there are I'll call it generally grants, credits, and incentives that are out there. So things like the IRA or the infrastructure, so kind of these federal programs that are out there with incentives. Those get more into your operating facility. What is the reduction, let's say, in the emissions that you've done by either changing out equipment and HVAC and mitigating that higher risk, and then can that qualify for, let's say, a tax incentive? And then that needs to be verified by a third party engineer coming on site to validate and such. So there's a lot that's out there, especially under the current administration, that is available. But I would advise, that's where I would encourage individuals that are looking to mitigate change or new construction of facilities to really work with their CPAs regarding that. But there's money out there.
How does this affect, saying now that you have like the entire team that works on this, how does this affect your suppliers? Like how you how you choose suppliers, how you choose new equipment, substrates, all that. Like how much has it changed how you go about procuring?
Procurement is a huge piece of this. I would say, almost if you take sales and marketing might be that front end of being at the tip of the spear, if you will, in terms of the client, requests coming in. Our procurement and innovation teams work really, really close together. Um, and it's natural that they do, because innovation is looking for unique solutions to solve issues like size and weight and various different things. But then you need that procurement component. And so, first of all, again, leadership. I give all credit to our leadership. Is that because this is a strategy, we're able to integrate this into our supply chain, right? Like we have a fantastic lead, Fausto, who leads our procurement across the enterprise, and his team work very closely with suppliers, and those suppliers know what our mission is and that we are seeking solutions across the board, not just the raw material itself. We are seeking solutions. And so the ongoing engagement, to have the suppliers bring us those innovations, bring us your new sources, educate us on how you're handling your emissions and various things. Because at the end of the day, much like that client side is looking at us as scope three, we're looking at our suppliers as our scope three. They're part of our footprint. So no matter what Lou Raiola goes out and tells the world about how great Vomela is doing operationally, we're going to have to consider our supply chain as well. And so it's a big part of it. But I think it's important for everyone to understand it will work best if it is adopted as a strategy from the top down, meaning our leadership on down, so that when you're meeting with your supply chain and engaging with your supply chain, it's just part of the way you do business. And it's the culture that is created in terms of the operating procedure. And that's to the credit of Vomela and what they've been able to do over the last several years. And again, that's a commitment to bringing in resources like the procurement gentleman I mentioned, and the general managers of facilities. So it's really been fun to see the evolution.
Right. You just mentioned sales and marketing. The bottom line question that everyone's going to ask: is it getting you in on client conversations? Is it producing leads? Is it helping close uh, new business? And is helping retain new business or retain business?
Yeah, I would say from our lens, it has been a true value proposition for us. And we believe in that dual approach, because if you think about it, first of all, let's talk about, if we're talking just revenue in general, we operate our facilities more efficiently, right? Well, and again, I personally believe when you have leadership strategic commitment and you invest in either equipment, right? Like we could get into a whole discussion on digital print. And, I mean, when you invest, you can see that you operate, right, more efficiently and at less cost. Just general, right? Just a generality. And so on the expense side, there's realization of value that's there. And then on the client side, it's happening, and it's only going to continue to happen. Again, I go back to that 90% roughly pressure. So as I call this the ESG ripple effect. So as clients are looking further down in their supply chain for alignment, they're making decisions on who are their suppliers. So first step is table stakes, right? There are people that will tune into this discussion and find that they may lose a client because they're not able to demonstrate that they're committed or where they are on that journey. I have seen it in various different industries of loss of business or change of terms that are there. We believe that it's a shared value. And so we all are in a commodity business, Chris, right? At the end of the day, this is a commodity. But with this leadership and strategy, we view ourselves as a valued partner, and thus that differentiates a company from being a commodity. And so we lead with it, right? We lean into this as a marketing attribute and a sales attribute to our clients. And at the end of the day, shouldn't we all really be solutions based, right? We're supporting the client. And if the client has made commitments and they're now looking internally for change, from the way a end cap looks or how it's constructed, we should all be looking at what are our unique solutions for that, and thus you create value with that. Pricing is dependent on the discussion, obviously, with the client in terms of what they see in that value. So yeah, we're seeing it as a business differentiator and a revenue source.
Great. Thank you. All right. Well, running out of time here because I don't want to have you go 4 hours on this because I know we could. Any last parting words on ESG before we part?
Yeah, I would just say this. The most important thing that I think I can share with everyone is to recognize where your organization is in kind of this ecosystem of your business. And I'm making an assumption that, at least for Vomela, we recognize that we are in the supply chain of our clients. And as such, it's so important that we lean into what is important to them and find our alignment. It's more about that. And again, I'm in the seat I'm in, I look at it from this lens. It's less about features and benefits, kind of selling and how you approach things. And it's more about what solutions can we provide to our clients who have made public disclosures or are making public disclosures and commitments. How do we enable them, assist them in meeting their goals? So I think it's that reflection on where an organization fits, within its business and ultimately its clients, to find that alignment. And then lastly, just to reinforce, Chris, you really can't get there in a half-hearted way or in a check the box way. If you're going to embrace this, spend the time with leadership and make sure that it's a commitment, an investment, and you'll have a different outcome. Because if not, and it's always a check the box, it's just going to be painful each step of the way. What do we do next? Oh gosh, here goes more money. Oh, next. We're here. It's just become part of our culture. So have that self-reflection and those internal conversations. And frankly, I think it's just a new era of business, right? Doing well by doing good. It's a new era of business.
All right, Lou. I do have 3 personal questions though.
Okay.
Are you ready for this?
I am. Are we recording? Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
First one is controversial. It's going to be a tough one for you. Better dresser, Lou Carnesecca or Rick Pitino?
Well, I'm going to go with Patino.
All right. So the sweater doesn't put Carnesecca over the top.
No.
All right. Okay. Two. So you have, is a 2-part question. You're stuck somewhere. You have a chance to watch one movie and have one meal with it. What's the meal and what's the movie?
Whew. Wow. Well, I guess I'll go with what my initial reaction was. I have to qualify this. I'm a full-blooded, proud Italian.
Okay.
So it's going to be pasta is the meal. It's going to be Godfather the movie.
Okay. All right. I love it. I love it. All right. And well, because I'm a pasta guy, what shape pasta are we talking about?
I'm a rigatoni guy.
Like it. I like it. Excellent. All right. Well, that's all I have for you today, Lou. Thank you so much for being part of this.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.